it's Sunday, and that means it's time again to check in with Bitcoin. And we're done here. Please be sure to check out the link in the description below so you can join us in our official TXA Discord server where we cover Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the major crypto movers. And if you join the private members section, TI covers altcoins in depth along with the trades that he's making now. Let's just take a moment to appreciate where we were last week. So 7 candles ago, 4, 5, 6, 7, we were sitting right up here on this line, and we were looking up and down. And that's not something that you necessarily are in a position of doing every single time you take a look at a chart, but we end up a lot of times in these midway areas in between major moves where we're not quite sure what's going to happen next. So we have to take a look at different indicators. We have to look at what support and resistance levels we're at. And some of the things we noted last week were that we had very low volume. In fact, our price, which was moving up, was diverging from our volume, which was moving down. And we call this price volume divergence. And that's usually a sign of a current move losing steam before we turn in the other direction. So since that occurred in a move up, we were more likely to push down from that area. And that's exactly what Bitcoin did. That should not be a surprise at all. One of the things we talked about was we were stuck in this tight little range here indicated by this green box I drew last week. And we said if we broke out of this to the downside, the most probable area Bitcoin was going next was about 23 to 24K. That has not changed. And in fact, that would make a lot of sense if we were starting to establish a bit of a new upward trending channel. We spent a lot of time last year in a downtrend channel. And for the first time after that long downtrend, we finally broke out and we bounced with strong volume, the strongest we've seen buying wise since the last all-time high back at 69K. And that was a very positive sign for the big picture. But in the short term, we also had to recognize that we were kind of stuck in a bit of an uptrend channel, and we were peaking up out of it, which got a lot of people excited. Now, the problem with this is we don't really yet have enough establishment of this uptrend to know if this is the top of the channel, if this is the top of the channel, if at some point we creep up a little higher and find our way all the way up in this 37 area, and that's the top of the channel. Until we have a good 3, 4, 5 touches, it is really hard to say we are in a trend that has been established. But we've got one solid bounce off the bottom here, a second touch there. If we come back down and we find this 23 to 24K area on Bitcoin and we touch there and we bounce off of it, that's going to really solidify the possibility that we are beginning a new upward trending move on Bitcoin in the big picture, not just a local picture. We're talking the big picture. And if this move starts to establish itself and we manage to break above the 37K area next. So what I'm talking about is we come back down, we check in, we pop up, and we make it up to this area and we break out of this area. That's when you start to look for those parabolic moves that produce new all-time highs. So we have a bit of work to do, but suffice it to say that that work has begun and everything we're seeing is positive so far. Now, the one thing we have to keep in mind about that is we never made it all the way down to the 618 logarithmic retracement from the last move up after the COVID dip. Now, that may be for a number of reasons. And one could argue this was an abnormal dip and the bottom should have been more around in here, in which case we hit the 618 perfectly. So we really have to take this with a bit of a grain of salt or even a tablespoon of salt, because it's hard to really justify that this was the bottom during that COVID move when the entire markets were pushed to extremes in a relatively short period of time. However, it does line up with the long-term logarithmic trend going all the way back to 2015, 2016 to tap that line and bounce and continue. Now, since all of that happened, we dipped underneath the line and we possibly found a bottom to reverse off of here. It is entirely possible and entirely plausible that this is the next bottom on Bitcoin and that we don't make it back to 16,000 again. However, where we are now lends us to the possibility that we could still be in for a test of those lows. If we make it to 23 or 24K, and this establishing trend line does not hold as support, and we break underneath it, we open ourselves up to a number of possibilities to the downside. One being a double bottom, we check back in at 1617, and one being a final test of support down to the deep bear market target at 12 or 14K. So we're not out of the woods yet, but for that to happen, we would really have to push. People would have to give up. There would have to be despair. So it's becoming less and less likely that we make it all the way to that deep bear market target, and more likely as time goes on and we pay attention to volume, that we find a support level here and establish a new uptrend channel. So where have we gone in the last week? We've pushed down off the top of that resistance point where we were stuck inside of that tight little range, and that coincides looking left with the old support at the all-time high. Matter of fact, if you can see here, this was where we broke, we bounced, we established our all-time high, we bounced again, we kind of checked in with a slightly higher, but I would almost call this a double top, a very sloppy, erratic double top. And then we finally broke that support level. Now, if you drag that line from that support level all the way over here, it should come as no surprise then that when we poked up out of it, we didn't quite find ourselves free flying into new territory. We've been there before. This was previously a support. Now it's a bit of resistance, and we are pushing off of that bit of resistance back to the downside. So where is Bitcoin likely to head in the next week? The most probable course of action for Bitcoin now is a pullback to 23 or 24K, but that does not mean that Bitcoin is turning bearish, not yet. It just means that we have a bit of testing to do to prove this potential turn of back to bullish price action. So if we can test that area and hold it, we're going to be in a good position for a bit of movement up to the upside if that does not break down. And in fact, if Bitcoin gets to this 23, 24K area, and you haven't really positioned yourself in this market yet for a potential uptrend, that is going to be your biggest realm of opportunity to move into altcoins, to move into Bitcoin, to move into Ethereum, and some of these other charts that we've been looking at in Discord. I don't want to give away too much. You really need to drop into Discord using the link in the description below if you're not already in there, and you'll find a lot more information about some of those charts. So I have to fight myself because the urge is real to jump into a lot of other charts with you, but this is our weekly wrap up. We're just checking in for about 10 minutes. So let's head on over to Ethereum before I give too much more away. If we look over here at Ethereum, we had a bit of the same thing going on. We were building a little bit of a local line to hold here, and that line has broken now, and Ethereum is back down into the territory it's been in for a while. This was a slightly higher high from that previously poked up area out of this triangle pattern. And now we've poked out a second time, but we are kind of sitting back in the top of it. So Ethereum not looking too favorable for an upside move just yet. This breakout of this triangle area came with very weak buying volume. If this was a true breakout and we were going to see a momentum breakout build into a positive move, we would expect to see a lot more volume show up on the daily chart for this type of a move. But it is showing us that Ethereum Bitcoin is holding in this area, which means Ethereum and Bitcoin's relative strength remains fairly balanced. And it has been that way since all the way back in May of 21, minus this kind of dip down, which we gave back and we went right back up. And you can kind of see, for the most part, we've been in this range. You could put a little bit on it, but this was kind of the break out of the bottom, and it was a just kidding moment as Ethereum came back and recovered from slipping out of that area. So Ethereum and Bitcoin remain relatively locked in terms of if one goes up, the other goes up. If one goes down, the other goes down. And on the day-to-day, we see minor variances of that relationship, which translates to this Ethereum Bitcoin chart. So as you see Ethereum, Bitcoin pushing down here, that means in this local area in the past week, Bitcoin has gained more strength versus Ethereum. But Bitcoin went down, you said. Well, if you're new to this, that should be a little bit of a surprise. But if you've been here for a while, that is not a surprise at all. Bitcoin went down, but Ethereum went down a little bit more. And we can measure this just to be sure. So here's Bitcoin, we're down about 9.3%. Here's Ethereum, we're down about 12%. So the difference of about 2% then shows up over here, about 3%. It depends on where you pull it from and exactly what time of day. So about 3.5%. The difference shows up on this F Bitcoin chart, and that tells us Ethereum has pushed down just a little bit more than Bitcoin in the last week, but nothing to write home about, nothing to get too excited about. Now, the DXY is something we've been watching very closely. Let's take just a quick peek at this because we're still in an important area over here on the DXY. If you look at this large uptrend channel that's been established for quite a long time, going back years. As long as Bitcoin has been around, the DXY has been around much, much longer. This is the US dollar index going all the way back to the 60s here. And you can see since 2008 crisis, the dollar has been slowly gaining strength in the big picture, but in the local picture, in the local area we are in, since that all-time high back in September of 22, around the time that Bitcoin was getting ready to peak, which happened just after, right? We have that peak happened in January when the DXY came down, Bitcoin peaked. We got a little bit of a bounce, and that was Bitcoin pulling back. And now we are pushing down on the DXY. We're sitting on the 50. So we've got a couple of possibilities here. One is we continue this ABC-like correction and the DXY pushes down and allows Bitcoin to move up. The other is this 50 area fib holds and the DXY pushes up again. It could do this for a while. It does not have to go straight down. And in fact, you can see times in the past when it gets stuck in an area, and even though it moved up a little bit, it took a long time for that little bit of movement. And you can see here another area where we kind of up, down, up, down, up, down. So we could get stuck in here in what some newer age crypto traders would call a BART-like pattern. And if that occurs, it's possible we end up going back up on the DXY. And that would push Bitcoin to those lows that we were looking at before. So keeping an eye on the DXY is very important because it shows the relative strength of the US dollar, which should be to some degree inversely correlated with Bitcoin. So if you're hoping Bitcoin goes up, you're hoping this DXY breaks the 50 in the next week or a couple of weeks ahead. This one can move very slow over a long period of time. Should that occur, Bitcoin gets the move that you're looking for and pushes back up. But if the DXY bounces here over the next week or so, that will give us the fuel for Bitcoin to come down and check in with this channel below. And you can see the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P the past week kind of just hung up in the air. So didn't really do a whole lot. Neither did the DXY, kind of staying tight in that area. Meanwhile, Bitcoin has pulled back and cooled off during that time period. So really in the spot that we are primed for the next week, in my opinion. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but in my opinion, after watching this market for a long time, I would not be surprised at all to see the next week on Bitcoin turn a little bearish, scare some new traders, possibly close some leveraged longs, and that may give us the fuel to get that push down into this area that we are looking for, where we may have the potential for new opportunities to enter this market. And it's going to be a really good time if we can get down there and hold. It might get scary in the short term. We might even get some wicks to the downside if some heavy liquidations come in. But if we don't continue pushing after that occurs, this will be a prime spot to start looking at where do I want to enter, what alts have I been watching for good entries on. That's where they should appear in the next week to month ahead. I'm not going to put 1 week time frame on it at this point because this could take a little while. We've got a lot of fundamental stuff going on. It's the end of the month. We're sliding into summer and things could pick up as we head into summer, but maybe slow for the next couple of weeks. So that's all we have time for today. Hopefully I didn't go too far over the 10 minutes, but I will certainly be back here with all of you next Sunday to check in, to wrap up with the market, and be sure that you check in the description below if you're not already in our Discord. I know I keep saying that, but it's because we want so many more of you out there to join our community, join the discussion, and participate as we all watch this market unfold in real time. Thanks, everyone, and I hope to see you next time here on the TXA Market Roundup.